Hi, I'm Gerry from Gerry's Craft Room, and in this video I'm going to make some Valentine's Day inspired cards. I start with using the anti-static tool on my card to prevent the embossing powder to stick to the card instead of the ink. I have an alphabet stamp and add 2 letters to my acrylic block. I use the Tonic Studios glue stick to help the stamp stay in place, and I start with stamping with Nuvo embossing ink. And then I'm going to add the first color embossing powder. I stamp 2 more letters before melting the first ones. You can heat set the first part right away if you like, and then add the next letters. And just so you know, I added the main products I used in the description box for you. You can find the full list of supplies on my blog, and we are still working on the new blog and website, and it's always a lot of work with computers and not half the fun as crafting. Anyway, if you want to come take a peek, you are very welcome. And if you're new here and you like what you see, don't forget to subscribe. After melting, I stamp the second set of letters, and I stamp them partly over the previous letters. I change one of the letters to get some difference, and I stamp again partly over the letters at the bottom this time. And then I add the second color embossing powder, and I'm going to melt it. And now the last set of letters, also partly over the previous ones. And I'm going to change the letters again to get lots of different ones. And then I add the third color embossing powder, and I'm going to melt it again. I have 3 Nuvo alcohol markers, and I start coloring the letters. I just picked matching colors with the embossing powders. And I color the letters, but I leave the parts where they overlap open. And I go over the color again to get a nice coverage and deep color of the markers. And here you can see leaving parts white gives a fun effect. Simple coloring like this is fun and easy to do, a bit like doodling. It's relaxing. You have to focus, but you don't have to think, just be in the coloring zone. Ink the edge of the card with the same color ink as the tea rose embossing powder. Also use this ink to make some splats. I add the ink to my desk and I spray some water. I dip in the brush and I tap on the brush over the card, and this will give different size splats. I let the card dry and added it to a white note card. I stamped and embossed the journal words, and I cut a few out and I am going to add them to the card. I have some orange jewel drops and I add those to the card using the same color drops as a glue. Nuvo drops are glue paint mix and the jewel drops dry clear, so using the same color drops as a glue is the perfect solution. I like pre-making my drops as it prevents you from messing up a project with wonky drops, and it reduces the drying time to a few minutes. So here's the first card. Now on with the next card. I stamp the word love and I color it with an aqua flow pen. now I've fussy cut the letters. You can use die cut letters too, of course, and there's also the option of using an electronic cutting machine. I also cut out the inside. I am my own cutting machine, and a dishwasher. I'm that too. I will come back to the letters in a bit. I have the butterfly stamps and I add one to the acrylic block, and I'm going to use Distress Oxide ink to stamp them. I add the other butterfly to the acrylic block and stamp that in the open space. Add some ink on my desk and I spray water next to the ink. I dip in the brush and make some splats again by tapping on the brush. I add some of the wild honey color I stamped with on my desk. And first I'm going to blot the pink splats. And then I'm going to make some more of the yellow splats. And then I dry the splats, and this way the color will be deeper than blotting. And here are the letters again. I add them to the black strip. I check how it looks and I decide to add some doodles along the side. Then I check with the sentiments again and I cut off a bit. And I'm going to distress the edges with the side of my scissors. And then I tape it to the card. I add some staples on both ends. I fold the end of the sentiment strip around the card and I flatten the backs of the staples off camera, and I added the card to a black note card. And this is the finished card. And now the last card. I stamp randomly with the old book page stamp, turning the card to get it in all directions. I'm going to use the stamping platform. I add a heart with the glue stick so I can stamp it a few times with black ink in the same place to get a nice deep dark color. I clean the stamp and I'm going to stamp it again with clear embossing ink. And now I add clear embossing powder. I could have used a black embossing powder with clear embossing ink too, but I wanted to show you a different option. I'm going to stamp the sentiment and a few small hearts. I'm going to color the heart with the same abandoned coral ink using a water brush. Some more freehand stamping with wild honey again, and I'm adding just some little details here and there using my finger to press it down gently. I fussy cut the stamped images and I'm going to add them to black card and cut them out again. I thought it needed a bit more black. I ink the edges of the card to add a bit more color, and I'm going to add the card to a white note card. And now I lay out the pieces and I'm going to add them to the card. I add them partly over each other for a fun look. So here's the finished card, and here are all the cards together. 3 not so obvious Valentine cards. I hope you liked the video. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and make sure to keep on crafting.